The snow fell in thick, lazy flakes outside the restaurant window, each one catching the amber glow of the streetlights before disappearing into the darkness. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, watching my breath fog the surface, anything to distract myself from the fact that I was about to walk into the most humiliating evening of my life. A blind date. On Christmas Eve. At 26 years old. My best friend Sarah had set this up 3 weeks ago. Her eyes bright with that meddling enthusiasm only happily married people possess. "His name is Dante," she'd said, gripping my hands across the coffee shop table. "He's successful, gorgeous, and he specifically asked about you after seeing your photo." I should have known then that something was off. Men like that, successful, gorgeous, didn't need blind dates. They certainly didn't need someone like me. A pediatric nurse working double shifts to pay off student loans, living in a studio apartment where the heat only worked half the time, wearing a dress I'd owned since college because I couldn't afford anything new. But Sarah had been so insistent, and I was so tired of being alone. The restaurant she'd chosen was called Vincenzo's, tucked into a quiet corner of the city's financial district. I'd walked past it 100 times on my way to the hospital, never daring to look at the menu posted in the window. The kind of place where a single appetizer cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I pulled my worn coat tighter around my body, feeling the cold December air seep through the thin fabric. My shoes, black flats with a hole in the left sole, squeaked against the salted pavement as I approached the entrance. Through the frosted glass doors, I could see warm light, the glimmer of crystal, the soft movement of well-dressed people who belonged in places like this. I didn't belong here. My hand trembled as I reached for the door handle. But before I could touch it, the door swung open. A man in a black suit appeared, his face impassive, his eyes scanning the street behind me with practiced efficiency. "Miss Brennan?" His voice was deep, accented with something Mediterranean. I blinked. "Yes, but how—" "This way, please." He stepped aside, gesturing into the warmth. The interior of Vincenzo's smelled like expensive wine, fresh bread, and something else. Something rich and indefinable that made my stomach clench with hunger and inadequacy in equal measure. The man in the black suit guided me past the hostess stand, past tables filled with couples laughing over champagne, past a fireplace where flames danced behind ornate iron scrollwork. We moved toward the back of the restaurant, to a section I hadn't even noticed from outside. Private booths with high walls, dim lighting that felt both intimate and isolating. My heart hammered against my ribs. "He's waiting for you," the man said, stopping before a booth tucked into the corner, half hidden by a carved wooden screen. I smoothed down my dress, a simple navy blue thing that had seemed acceptable in my apartment, but now felt threadbare and cheap. My fingers caught on a loose thread at the hem. Perfect. Then I saw him. He sat with his back to the wall, a position that gave him a clear view of the entire restaurant. The first thing I noticed was his suit. Charcoal gray, tailored so perfectly it looked like it had been painted onto his body. The second thing was his hands, resting on the table. Long fingers adorned with a single ring on his right hand, thick gold etched with symbols I couldn't decipher from this distance. The third thing was his face. Sarah had said gorgeous. She hadn't said devastating. He couldn't have been older than 32. Maybe 33. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp jawline, high cheekbones, a mouth that looked cruel even when it wasn't smiling. But his eyes, God, his eyes, even from several feet away, I could see they were dark, almost black, and they were fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch in my throat. He didn't stand when I approached, didn't smile, just watched me with those dark eyes as I stumbled forward, suddenly hyper-aware of every flaw. My chipped nail polish, the run in my tights I'd tried to hide with clear nail polish, the way my hair had frizzed in the cold. "Dante." My voice came out smaller than I'd intended. "Sit." Not a request. A command, delivered in a voice like smoke and gravel. I sat. The leather booth was soft, expensive, and I sank into it feeling like I was being swallowed. Across from me, Dante, if that was even his real name, continued to study me with those unsettling eyes. He hadn't touched the wine in front of him, a deep red that looked black in the dim light. "You're late," he said finally. What? No," Sarah said 7:30. It's only... I fumbled for my phone, but his hand moved, just slightly, and the man in the black suit appeared from nowhere, placing a glass of wine in front of me. 7:15, Dante said. I've been waiting since 7. My cheeks burned. I'm sorry, I thought... Sarah got the time wrong. He leaned back, and I caught a glimpse of something at his collar. A flash of ink, a tattoo creeping up from beneath the crisp white shirt. She does that sometimes, doesn't she? Gets details wrong. The way he said it made my spine straighten. You know Sarah? I know of Sarah. His eyes never left my face. Her husband works in acquisitions. We've crossed paths. Something about the way he said crossed paths made my stomach twist, but I couldn't pinpoint why. I reached for the wine glass, needing something to do with my hands, and took a sip. It was the best wine I'd ever tasted, which wasn't saying much given my usual budget extended to whatever was on sale at the corner store. You're a nurse, Dante said. Not a question. Pediatric nurse, at Mercy General. I set the glass down, trying to steady my shaking hands. Sarah must have told you. She did. He tilted his head slightly, and the movement reminded me of a predator calculating distance. You work the overnight shift twice a week, Wednesdays and Fridays. You take the bus because your car broke down 8 months ago, and you haven't been able to afford the repairs. You live alone on Morrison Street, 3rd floor, apartment 304. The blood drained from my face. How do you... You have a small scar on your left hand from a kitchen accident when you were 12. You don't talk to your mother anymore. Your father died when you were 19. He leaned forward, and I could smell him now, something expensive and dark. Cedar and smoke. You're drowning in student debt and you skip meals to make rent. You're exhausted, Emma. You're so tired you can barely see straight. I should have run. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get up, to leave, to get as far away from this man as possible, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only stare at him as he smiled for the first time, a slow curve of his mouth that didn't reach his eyes. How do you know all that? I whispered. I make it my business to know things. He signaled to someone I couldn't see, and suddenly there was food appearing on our table, dishes I hadn't ordered, hadn't even seen on a menu, especially about people who interest me. Why would I interest you? His smile widened, and I saw something dangerous flash in those dark eyes. That's what we're here to find out. I should have left then. Should have grabbed my coat and walked out into the snow and never looked back. But I was so hungry, and the food smelled so good, and there was something about the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the world who mattered, that made me stay. Just for a moment. Just long enough to understand what I'd walked into. The man in the black suit reappeared, leaning down to whisper something in Dante's ear. I watched his expression shift, saw something cold and deadly pass across his face before it smoothed back into that careful neutrality. Excuse me, he said, standing in one fluid motion. I need to make a phone call. Don't leave, Emma. We're not finished. He walked away, and I noticed for the first time that there were other men in black suits positioned throughout the restaurant, all of them watching our booth with the same practiced efficiency as the first one. My phone buzzed in my purse, a text from Sarah. How's it going? He's gorgeous, right? I stared at the message, then at the food cooling on the table, then at the men in black suits who were definitely not waiters. My hands were shaking again as I reached for my coat. That's when I saw it. Dante's phone, left on the table beside his untouched wine. The screen was lit up with an incoming message, and even from across the table I could read the preview. Package secured. The DeLuca situation has been handled. Awaiting your orders. DeLuca. Situation. Handled. Oh God. I stood up so fast I knocked my wine glass over, red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. One of the men in black suits moved toward me, but I was already backing away, my coat clutched against my chest. I have to go, I said to no one, to everyone. I forgot. I have to, but I'd forgotten my purse. It was still in the booth, and when I turned back to grab it, I saw Dante standing at the entrance to our private section, his phone pressed to his ear, his eyes locked on mine. He lowered the phone slowly. Sit down, Emma. I really need to. Sit. Down. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Every instinct I had was screaming danger, but my legs wouldn't move. The men in black suits had closed in, not threateningly, but enough that I understood. Leaving wasn't an option anymore. I sat. Dante returned to the booth, settling back into his seat with the casual grace of someone who'd never been denied anything in his life. He picked up his wine glass, took a slow sip, then set it down with deliberate precision. "You read my message," he said calmly. "I didn't mean to. You're afraid now." He studied me with those dark eyes. "Your pulse is racing. I can see it in your throat. You want to run." "Please," I whispered. "I don't know what this is, but I don't want any part of it. I'll forget everything. I swear You spilled wine on a $15,000 tablecloth," he interrupted, his voice still calm, still controlled. "That's unfortunate. $15,000 for a tablecloth. I'll pay for it," I said desperately, even though we both knew I couldn't. "I'll work it off. How?" He leaned forward again, and this time I could see the ink more clearly. A serpent or a dragon coiling up his neck. "You make $38,000 a year before taxes. After rent, utilities, loan payments, and food, you have approximately $200 left each month. How exactly would you pay me back, Emma?" Tears burned behind my eyes. "What do you want from me?" He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze never wavering from my face. Then he smiled again, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "I want you to have dinner with me," he said simply. "Is that so unreasonable?" Yes, I wanted to scream. Everything about this is unreasonable. But what I said was, okay, because I was trapped, and we both knew it. Dante gestured to the food, still untouched between us. "Eat, Emma. You're going to need your strength for what comes next." I forced myself to pick up the fork, though my hand trembled so badly I nearly dropped it. The pasta in front of me, something with cream and mushrooms that probably had a French name I couldn't pronounce, smelled divine, but my stomach was twisted into such tight knots I wasn't sure I could swallow. Dante watched me take the first bite, his dark eyes tracking the movement of my hand to my mouth, like a scientist observing an experiment. I chewed mechanically, tasting nothing despite the explosion of flavors on my tongue. "Better," he murmured. "You're too thin. When's the last time you had a proper meal?" The question was so absurd given the circumstances that I almost laughed. Almost. "I eat. Ramen doesn't count. Neither does whatever vending machine coffee you survive on during your shifts." He cut into his own food with precise movements, the knife gliding through meat like butter. "You'll eat 3 meals a day from now on. I'll have it arranged. You'll have..." "What?" The fork clattered against my plate. "You can't just..." "I can." He took a bite, chewed, swallowed, all while maintaining eye contact. "I do what I want, Emma. The sooner you understand that, the easier this will be." "Easier." My voice cracked. "What is this exactly? Why am I here? Why did you..." I gestured helplessly at the table, at him, at everything. "Sarah said this was a blind date, but you already knew everything about me. You've been watching me." "Yes." The casual admission hit me like a physical blow. "That's insane. That's stalking. Call it what you want." He set down his silverware, giving me his full attention. The intensity of his gaze made me want to shrink into the leather booth and disappear. 3 months ago, you were leaving the hospital after a double shift. It was raining. You gave your umbrella to a homeless woman sitting outside the emergency entrance, then walked 6 blocks in the downpour to your bus stop. I remembered that night, remembered the woman's grateful smile, the way the rain had soaked through my scrubs, how I'd shivered the entire bus ride home. 2 months ago, Dante continued, you spent your day off volunteering at the children's shelter on 5th Street. You brought books from your own collection, even though you can barely afford groceries. Last month, you covered a coworker's shift, even though you were already working 60 hours that week, because her daughter was sick and she'd have lost her job otherwise. Each word felt like he was peeling back my skin, exposing parts of myself I'd never meant for anyone to see. How do you know all this? I told you. I make it my business to know. He leaned back, that dangerous smile playing at his lips again. You're a good person, Emma. Genuinely good. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How valuable? I'm not I shook my head, trying to process. People help other people. That's normal. No. His voice went hard. People look out for themselves. They take what they can get, and they don't look back. But you? He tilted his head, studying me. You give pieces of yourself away until there's nothing left. You sacrifice and struggle and suffer. And you do it with a smile because you think that's what you're supposed to do. Tears blurred my vision. I blinked them back furiously, refusing to cry in front of this stranger who somehow saw too much. You don't know me. I know you better than anyone in your life. He said it with such certainty that I couldn't argue. I know you're drowning and too proud to ask for help. I know you're exhausted and alone and barely holding on. And I know that tonight, you came here hoping maybe, just maybe, someone might see you as more than invisible. The tears spilled over then, hot tracks down my cold cheeks. I swiped at them angrily, humiliated. What do you want from me? Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and caught my wrist. Not roughly, but firmly enough that I couldn't pull away. His thumb pressed against my pulse point, and I knew he could feel how fast my heart was racing. I want to take care of you, he said softly. I want to make sure you never skip another meal. Never work yourself into exhaustion. Never have to choose between paying rent and fixing your car. I want to give you everything you've been denying yourself. It sounded like a dream, like a fairy tale, like a trap. Why? I whispered. His grip on my wrist tightened fractionally. Because you're mine now. The words should have terrified me. They did terrify me. But there was something else underneath the fear. Something warm and traitorous that whispered, someone sees you. Someone wants you. Someone cares. I'm not... I tried to pull my hand back, but he held firm. You can't just decide that. I'm not a thing you can own. No. He agreed. You're much more valuable than a thing. He released my wrist, but I could still feel the brand of his fingers on my skin. Finish your dinner, Emma. Then we'll discuss the terms. Terms? My voice was barely audible. Of our arrangement. I should have run. Should have screamed. Should have done anything except sit there and pick up my fork again, but my body moved without permission, scooping pasta and bringing it to my mouth. The food tasted like ash now. But I ate because he told me to, and some broken part of me didn't know how to refuse. Dante made a phone call in rapid Italian while I ate, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl at one point before smoothing out again. The men in black suits shifted positions around us, a choreographed dance of security I was only beginning to understand. When my plate was empty, when had I eaten it all, he ended the call and turned his full attention back to me. Better? He said approvingly, some colors coming back to your face. He signaled, and one of his men appeared with a leather folder. Dante opened it, extracted something, and slid it across the table. A check. Made out to me. For $50,000. I stared at it, unable to process the numbers. What is this? Consider it an advance. He said it like $50,000 was nothing. Pocket change. That should cover your student loans, your back rent, and leave enough for you to buy some proper clothes and food. Tomorrow, someone will deliver a car to your apartment. Something reliable, safe. Your shift schedule at the hospital will be reduced to 3 days a week, normal hours only. You can't. I don't. My hands were shaking again, worse than before. I can't accept this. You can. You will. He pulled out another document, this one several pages long. This is a contract. It outlines the terms of our arrangement. You'll read it, sign it, and then you'll come home with me tonight. The room tilted. Home with you? No, absolutely not. Yes, no room for argument in that single word. You're not going back to that apartment, Emma. It's not safe. Not safe from what? But I already knew the answer. Not safe from him. From whatever world he inhabited. Whatever darkness he brought with him. From people who might want to hurt you to get to me. He said it so matter-of-factly, like violence was as natural as breathing. The moment you walked through that door tonight, you became associated with me. That makes you a target. Then let me leave, I begged. Let me walk away. I'll forget all of this, I swear. Too late. His eyes went cold, glacial. You think I'd let you go now, after I've finally found you? He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. "You have two choices, Emma. Come with me willingly, or come with me unwillingly. Either way, you're coming." The men in black suits closed in tighter. My purse appeared on the table. When had someone gotten it? Along with my coat. Dante held out his hand, waiting. I looked at that hand, at the gold ring glinting in the dim light, at the power and danger it represented. Then I looked at the check, at the contract, at the exit that was blocked by armed men. I'd come here tonight hoping for connection, for someone to see me. I'd gotten my wish in the most twisted way possible. Slowly, hating myself, I reached out and placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine like a vice, warm and possessive. He pulled me to my feet, and I stumbled against him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, to smell that intoxicating scent of cedar and smoke, and something darker underneath. "Good girl," he murmured against my hair, and I hated how those words made something in my chest flutter. He kept hold of my hand as we walked through the restaurant, past the curious stares of other diners, past the hostess who wouldn't meet my eyes. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, coating the city in white. A black SUV waited at the curb, engine running, windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. One of the men opened the back door. Dante gestured for me to get in. I hesitated at the threshold, one foot on the curb, one foot in whatever nightmare I was stepping into. This was it. My last chance to run, to scream, to fight. But where would I go? Back to my freezing apartment, my crushing debt, my exhausting life of barely surviving. At least this prison came with warmth, with food, with someone who saw me, even if his gaze held something dark and possessive that should have sent me running. I climbed into the SUV. Dante slid in beside me, close enough that our thighs touched. The door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded like a cell door locking. The driver, another man in a black suit, pulled smoothly into traffic without a word. "Where are we going?" My voice sounded strange, distant. "My penthouse." Dante's hand found mine again in the darkness, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "Don't worry, you'll be comfortable there, comfortable." As if comfort was what I should be concerned about. As if I wasn't sitting next to a man who just bought me like property, who'd threatened me into compliance, who had situations handled and messages about packages secured. The city lights blurred past the windows as we drove through streets I recognized, then into neighborhoods I'd only seen from a distance. Places where the buildings touched the sky, and the people inside them never worried about making rent. Dante made another phone call, this time in English, but using terms I didn't understand. Clean the guest room. Have clothes delivered by morning, sizes. He glanced at me, his eyes traveling over my body with clinical assessment. Size 4, maybe 6. Conservative styles for now. And get rid of the wine stain at Vincenzo's. I don't want questions. The wine stain. The $15,000 tablecloth. The trap that had closed around me the moment I'd knocked over that glass. Had it been a trap? Or had I walked into it willingly, drawn by desperation and loneliness and the seductive promise of being seen? The SUV pulled up to a building that was all glass and steel, modern architecture that screamed money and power. A doorman rushed to open the vehicle door before Dante's guard could move. The man's eyes widened when he saw Dante, and he stepped back immediately, his gaze dropping. "Mr. Salvatore," he said, his voice tight with fear or respect. I couldn't tell which. Salvatore. So Dante wasn't even his real first name. Or maybe it was his last name, or maybe both were lies. Everything about this man was a carefully constructed facade, and I'd stumbled into it like a moth drawn to flame. We crossed a marble lobby where everything gleamed. The floors, the walls, the chandelier that must have cost more than I'd make in 5 years. The elevator was mirrored on all sides, and I caught sight of myself. Small, pale, insignificant next to Dante's commanding presence. His reflection was all sharp angles and dark intensity, while mine was soft edges and exhaustion. We didn't match. We'd never match. The elevator rose so smoothly I barely felt the movement, the numbers climbing higher and higher until they stopped at PH. The doors opened directly into an apartment. No, a penthouse that took up the entire floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, which sprawled below us like a carpet of stars. The interior was masculine and minimalist. Dark furniture, Expensive art on the walls, surfaces so clean they looked untouched. It smelled like leather and wood polish, and that cedar scent I was beginning to associate with the man standing too close behind me. "Welcome home," Dante said, and the words felt like a life sentence. Home. The word echoed in my head as I stood frozen in the entrance, unable to move deeper into the space that felt more like a museum than a living area. Everything was too perfect, too pristine, too far removed from anything I'd ever known. Dante moved past me with the confidence of someone who owned not just this space, but the entire world around it. He shrugged off his suit jacket, revealing the crisp white shirt beneath, the holster I'd somehow missed seeing before now visible against his ribs. A gun. Of course he carried a gun. My stomach dropped. "Marco will show you to your room," Dante said, gesturing to one of the guards who'd followed us up. "You'll find everything you need. Tomorrow we'll discuss the details of our arrangement more thoroughly. Tonight, you rest. I can't stay here." The words burst out before I could stop them. "This is insane. You can't just—" "Emma." He turned to face me fully, and the look in his eyes silenced whatever protest I'd been forming. "You're exhausted. You're overwhelmed. But you're safe here. Safer than you've been in years. Tomorrow things will be clearer. For now, just breathe." Safe. The word was laughable coming from a man who'd essentially kidnapped me. But my body was betraying me, exhaustion crashing over me in waves now that the adrenaline was fading. When had I last slept more than 4 hours? When had I last felt warm all the way through? Marco, the guard, cleared his throat softly. "This way, Miss Brennan." I followed him down a hallway lined with abstract paintings that probably cost more than my entire life, past closed doors that hid God knows what, until we reached a room at the far end. He opened the door, and I stepped inside. It was bigger than my entire apartment. A massive bed dominated the space, covered in white linens that looked like clouds. There were windows overlooking the city, a bathroom visible through an open door that gleamed with marble and gold fixtures, and a walk-in closet that was currently empty, but could probably fit a family of 4. "Mr. Salvatore had this prepared for you," Marco said, his voice carefully neutral. "If you need anything, there's a phone by the bed. Press 1 for the kitchen, 2 for security, 3 for Mr. Salvatore directly. 3 for Mr. Salvatore." As if I'd willingly call the man who'd taken away every choice I had. Marco left, closing the door behind him with a soft click. I waited, counting to 60, then tried the handle. Unlocked. I wasn't sure whether to be relieved or more frightened. He didn't need to lock me in because where would I go? 50 floors up, surrounded by his people, in a part of the city where I stuck out like a stain on silk. Even if I made it to the street, he'd find me. He'd already proven he could track my every movement. I moved to the windows, pressing my palms against the cold glass. The city spread below me, all those tiny lights representing lives being lived, people who were free to come and go as they pleased. Had it only been a few hours since I'd walked into Vincenzo's, it felt like a lifetime ago. My reflection stared back at me, hollow-eyed and pale. Who was I now? Not the Emma who'd woken up this morning, annoyed about working Christmas but grateful to have a job. That Emma felt like a stranger already. Someone naive enough to think a blind date was the worst thing that could happen to her. A knock on the door made me jump. "Yes?" My voice cracked. The door opened and a woman entered carrying a tray. She was older, maybe 60, with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple black dress and moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd been in service for years. "I'm Maria," she said in accented English. "I manage Mr. Salvatore's household. I brought you some tea and something to help you sleep." She set the tray on the nightstand, a pot of tea, a cup, and a small white pill in a dish. I eyed the pill warily. "What is it?" "Just melatonin," Maria said gently. "Nothing harmful. Mr. Salvatore thought you might have trouble sleeping in a new place." She poured the tea with practiced hands. "You should change out of those clothes. There's a robe in the bathroom, and I'll have proper sleepwear brought up." "I don't need—" "Please." Her eyes met mine, and I saw something there. Sympathy? Understanding? Let me help you. It will be easier if you just let me help. Easier. Everyone kept using that word, as if any of this could be easy. But I was so tired, and the tea smelled like chamomile and honey, and Maria's hands were gentle as she guided me toward the bathroom. I caught sight of myself in the massive mirror. My makeup smeared, my hair wild, that cheap navy dress hanging off my frame, and felt tears burn behind my eyes again. "I'll draw you a bath," Maria said, already moving toward the enormous tub. "You'll feel better once you're warm." I wanted to argue, to maintain some shred of dignity or resistance. But what was the point? I was here. He'd won. Fighting would only make it harder, just like Maria said. The bath was heaven, scented oils and heat that seeped into my bones, washing away the grime of the day, if not the stain of what had happened. Maria had left the robe as promised, thick white terry cloth that felt like being wrapped in a cloud. When I emerged, she was waiting with a nightgown, simple but clearly expensive, the fabric cool and soft against my skin. "Drink your tea," she urged, pressing the cup into my hands. "And take the pill. You need rest." I obeyed, too numb to resist. The tea was sweet and warm, coating my throat. The pill was small, easy to swallow. Maria fussed around the room, turning down the bed, dimming the lights, treating me like I was something precious and breakable. Has he done this before? The question escaped before I could stop it. "Brought women here?" Maria paused, her hand on the light switch. When she turned to face me, her expression was carefully controlled. "No, Miss Brennan. Never. In the 5 years I've worked for Mr. Salvatore, you're the first woman to set foot in this penthouse." I didn't know whether that made things better or worse. "Sleep now," Maria said softly. "Tomorrow is a new day." She left, and I was alone in this enormous room with its enormous bed and enormous windows, showing me how small I was in comparison to everything around me. The melatonin was already taking effect, making my limbs heavy, my thoughts fuzzy at the edges. I climbed into the bed, sinking into mattress that probably cost more than a year of my salary. The sheets smelled fresh and clean, and despite everything, my body relaxed into the comfort it had been denied for so long. My last thought before sleep claimed me was, I should be more afraid. But God help me. I was too exhausted to care. I woke to sunlight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to close, and the disorienting sensation of not knowing where I was. The room came into focus slowly. Too big, too bright, too expensive. And memory crashed back like a wave. Dante. The restaurant. The contract I hadn't signed. The choice that wasn't a choice. Christmas Day. I was supposed to be at the hospital, working my shift, bringing cheer to sick children who had to spend the holiday in hospital beds. Instead, I was here, in a penthouse prison, owned by a man whose last name I'd only learned by accident. My phone. Where was my phone? I scrambled out of bed, searching frantically until I found my purse on a chair I didn't remember putting it on. The phone was dead. Of course it was. I'd forgotten to charge it last night in the chaos. But there was a charger on the nightstand, plugged in, and waiting like someone had anticipated my needs. Someone. Him. I plugged in the phone and waited for it to power on, my heart hammering. 15 missed calls from Sarah. A dozen texts asking if I was okay, if the date had gone well. Why wasn't I responding? The most recent one, sent at 2 a.m. "Emma, please answer. I'm worried. Call me." My fingers hovered over the screen. What could I say? "Hey, Sarah, your friend set me up with a mobster who's decided I belong to him now. Thanks for that." A knock on the door interrupted my spiral. "Miss Brennan?" Maria's voice, cheerful despite the early hour. "Mr. Salvatore requests your presence for breakfast in 15 minutes. I've brought clothes." Requests, as if I could refuse. Maria entered with an armful of shopping bags, all from stores I'd never dared enter. She laid out options on the bed, jeans that looked like they'd actually fit, soft sweaters in neutral colors, undergarments still in their packaging that were definitely not from Target. "How did he know my size?" I asked, picking up a pair of jeans that were exactly my measurements. Maria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Salvatore is very thorough." Thorough. Another word for invasive, controlling, terrifying. I dressed in a daze. The jeans fit perfectly. as did the cream-colored sweater and the bra that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Everything felt like armor and a costume at the same time, transforming me into someone who might belong in a place like this. Maria guided me back through the penthouse, and in daylight, I could see details I'd missed last night, family photos in expensive frames. Dante as a child with people who had the same dark eyes, the same sharp features, art that belonged in museums, security cameras in every corner, tiny red lights blinking like watching eyes. The dining room overlooked the city, all glass and light, and a table that could seat 12 but was set for 2. Dante sat at the head, reading something on a tablet, dressed casually in black pants and a dark gray sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous than the suit had. He looked up when I entered, those dark eyes traveling over me in assessment. Something flickered in his expression. Approval, possession, hunger, before it smoothed into neutrality. "Good morning, Emma. Sit." I sat in the chair to his right, the only one with a place setting. Coffee appeared immediately, poured by a young man in a white jacket who vanished as quickly as he'd come. The coffee smelled incredible, and despite my determination to resist everything about the situation, I wrapped my hands around the warm cup and took a sip. It was the best coffee I'd ever tasted. "You slept well," Dante observed. Not a question. "How would you know?" He gestured to something I couldn't see. "The cameras showed you didn't move all night. That's good. You needed rest." "Cameras. In my bedroom. Watching me sleep." The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. "You watched me sleep?" "My security team monitors all areas of the penthouse." He said it like it was perfectly reasonable. "For your safety." "That's..." I set down the cup before I threw it. "That's a violation. You can't just..." "I can." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with that unsettling intensity. "And I will. Every moment you're in my care, I need to know you're safe. That means cameras, guards, and yes, monitoring where you are and what you're doing. You'll get used to it. I'll never get used to being watched like a prisoner." "You're not a prisoner." His voice hardened slightly. "Prisoners don't get designer clothes and gourmet meals. Prisoners don't have every comfort provided for them. Prisoners don't get offered $50,000 and a better life. Prisoners don't get choices either." I shot back, surprising myself with the venom in my voice, just like I didn't get a choice about being here. Silence fell between us, tense and crackling. Dante's jaw tightened, and I saw his hands flex against the table. Once, twice, before he controlled whatever impulse had risen. "You're right," he said finally. And the admission shocked me. "You didn't get a choice. But Emma, if I'd given you one, what would you have chosen? To go back to that apartment where the heat doesn't work? To keep drowning in debt? To work yourself to death for people who don't appreciate what you do? That's not..." "Yes, it is." He leaned forward, and I found myself trapped in his gaze. "I'm offering you a way out. Security, comfort, protection. All you have to do is accept it. And what do you get?" I demanded. "Nobody does this out of kindness. What do you want from me?" The smile that curved his lips was dark and predatory. "I want you. Here, with me, where I can see you and know you're safe. I want to come home and find you waiting. I want to give you everything you've been denied and watch you bloom." "Is that so terrible?" "Yes," I wanted to scream. "Because it's not real. Because you're not offering me freedom. You're offering me a gilded cage." But the words stuck in my throat, because part of me, a broken, desperate part, whispered, "Would that be so bad?" Food arrived then, plate after plate of breakfast items I'd only seen in magazines. Eggs Benedict, fresh fruit, pastries that smelled like butter and sugar and heaven. My stomach growled despite my anger, betraying me. "Eat," Dante commanded softly. "Then we'll talk about the contract." The contract. The terms of my imprisonment. I picked up my fork, hating myself, hating him, hating how good the food tasted, and how warm the penthouse was, and how the clothes fit perfectly, and how some twisted part of me was already wondering what it would be like to just surrender, to stop fighting and let someone else carry the weight for a while, even if that someone was the devil himself. The contract sat between us on the table like a coiled snake, its pages crisp and white against the dark wood. Dante had produced it after breakfast, sliding it across to me with the same casual confidence he applied to everything else, as if my signature was inevitable, a foregone conclusion. "Read it carefully," he said, refilling my coffee cup without asking if I wanted more. "Take your time. Ask questions." I pulled the document closer, my hand still trembling slightly from the caffeine or the fear or both. The letterhead read Salvatore Enterprises in embossed letters, and the first page was dense with legal terminology that made my head swim. But I forced myself to focus, to read every word, because this wasn't just a contract. It was the terms of whatever prison sentence I'd stumbled into. The basics were clear enough. I would reside at Dante's penthouse for a minimum of 6 months. During that time, all my expenses would be covered: food, clothing, medical care, anything I needed. My student loans would be paid in full. A monthly allowance of $5,000 would be deposited into my account. In return, I would be available to Dante as he required. Available. The word made my skin crawl. "What does available mean?" I asked, my voice tight. Dante leaned back in his chair, watching me over the rim of his coffee cup. "It means you're mine. You live here, you follow my rules, and when I want your company, you provide it. Company." I forced myself to meet his eyes. "You mean sex?" "If that's what I want, yes." He said it without shame, without hesitation. "But that's not all I want, Emma. I want someone to talk to at the end of a long day. Someone to share meals with. Someone who's here, present. Not just physically, but emotionally. You want a girlfriend." The word tasted bitter. "Except I don't get to leave, and you're paying me to be here. I want more than a girlfriend." His eyes darkened, and something in his expression made my breath catch. "I want you to belong to me completely. Your time, your attention, your presence. In exchange, you'll have everything you've ever needed and more." I looked back down at the contract, my vision blurring. There were clauses about confidentiality. I couldn't discuss anything I saw or heard while living with him. Clauses about my whereabouts. I needed permission to leave the penthouse, and would always be accompanied by security. Clauses about termination. If I breached the contract, I'd owe back every penny he'd spent on me, plus damages. It was airtight. A trap designed by lawyers who knew exactly how to cage someone while making it look like a choice. "What if I refuse?" I whispered. "What if I don't sign?" Dante set down his cup slowly, deliberately. "Then you'll owe me $15,000 for the tablecloth, plus the cost of last night's meal, the clothes you're wearing, and the accommodations I've already provided. Call it $20,000, give or take. I'll expect payment within 30 days. $20,000. Money I didn't have and couldn't get. That's extortion. That's business." He tilted his head, studying me. "But I'm not unreasonable, Emma. If you truly want to walk away, I'll give you an alternative. Work off the debt. At your current nursing salary, accounting for taxes and your existing obligations, it would take approximately," he paused, calculating, "4 years, during which time I'd expect regular payments, with interest, of course. 4 years. 4 years of drowning even deeper, of never escaping the cycle of debt and exhaustion. 4 years of knowing he was out there, watching, waiting for me to miss a payment so he could collect. Or I could sign. 6 months in a gilded cage, and then freedom with enough money to start over. Except, I didn't believe for a second that it would end after 6 months. Men like Dante didn't let go of things they decided were theirs. "I need time to think," I said, pushing back from the table. "You have until this evening." Dante stood as well, towering over me even from several feet away. "I have business to attend to today. Marco and 2 other guards will remain here with you. Maria will help you settle in, explore the penthouse, rest, do whatever you need. But Emma..." His hand caught my chin, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. "Don't try to leave. You won't make it past the lobby, and I'd hate to have to bring you back by force." The touch sent electricity through me. Fear and something else. Something I didn't want to name. His thumb brushed across my lower lip, a gesture so intimate and possessive that I froze. "Good girl," he murmured, then released me and walked away, his footsteps silent on the expensive floors. I stood there for a long moment after he left, my chin burning where he'd touched it, my heart racing in my chest. Through the windows, I could see the city waking up properly now. Christmas morning, families gathering, people living normal lives while I stood in a penthouse prison, trying to decide if I should sign away 6 months of my life. Maria appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "Would you like a tour of the penthouse, Miss Brennan? Or perhaps you'd prefer to rest?" "A tour," I said, needing to move, to do something other than stand here spiraling. The penthouse was even larger than I'd realized. 4 bedrooms, each with its own bathroom. A library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes in multiple languages. A gym that was better equipped than any I'd seen. A media room with a screen that took up an entire wall, and Dante's office, which Maria showed me from the doorway without entering. "Mr. Salvatore's private space," she explained. "No one enters without permission." I peered inside, catching glimpses of dark furniture, more books, and a massive desk covered in papers and computer monitors. The room smelled like him, cedar and smoke and power. "Has he ever brought anyone else here?" I asked again, needing confirmation of what she'd told me last night. "Any other women?" Maria shook her head firmly. "Never. Mr. Salvatore is very particular about his privacy. He doesn't bring business associates here. He doesn't host parties. And until you, no woman has crossed this threshold." "Why me?" The question burst out before I could stop it. "What makes me so special that he'd go to all this trouble?" Maria's expression softened with something that might have been pity. "That's a question only Mr. Salvatore can answer, Miss Brennan. But I've worked for him for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you, the way he looks at me, like I was something precious and breakable that he wanted to protect and possess in equal measure." My phone buzzed in my pocket. It had been buzzing periodically all morning with texts from Sarah that I'd been ignoring. This time, though, it wasn't Sarah. It was an unknown number. "Stop ignoring your friend. Tell her you're fine and spending Christmas with family. Don't make me remind you of the confidentiality clause you haven't signed yet. D." I stared at the message, ice flooding my veins. He was watching. Even when he wasn't here, he was watching. I typed back with shaking fingers. "You're insane." The response came immediately. "I'm thorough. There's a difference. Now text Sarah before she calls the police." He was right, of course. Sarah would absolutely call the police if I kept ignoring her, and that would create complications neither of us wanted. With numb fingers, I opened her message thread and typed out a lie that tasted like ash. "Hey, sorry for the radio silence. Date went great, actually. Ended up going to his place and then his family's house for Christmas. Phone died. I'm fine, having a good time. We'll call you tomorrow." The response was instantaneous. "OMG, Emma! I knew you two would hit it off. Tell me everything tomorrow. Merry Christmas." I locked my phone and shoved it back in my pocket, feeling sick. "Miss Brennan?" Maria's voice was gentle. "Perhaps you should rest. You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied, but my legs were shaking and my vision was swimming at the edges. Maria guided me back to my room, my cage, and helped me onto the bed. "Just breathe," she said softly. "It gets easier." "Has he done this before?" I asked again, desperate for different answers. "To other people? Does he always—" "Mr. Salvatore is a complicated man," Maria interrupted carefully. "But he's not cruel, Miss Brennan. He protects what's his, fiercely. Sometimes that protection looks like control. But it comes from—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "It comes from a place of caring, even if the methods seem extreme. Caring. As if kidnapping someone and forcing them into a contract was an act of love. But I was too exhausted to argue, too overwhelmed to process anymore. I let Maria tuck a blanket around me like I was a child, let her dim the lights and promise to check on me later. When the door closed and I was alone, I finally let the tears come, hot, angry tears that soaked into the expensive pillowcase. What had I become in less than 24 hours? A possession. A kept woman. A bird in a gilded cage who was already learning that fighting only made the bars feel tighter. I must have fallen asleep because I woke to darkness outside the windows and the smell of food wafting from somewhere in the penthouse. My phone showed it was nearly 7 p.m. I'd slept the entire day away, exhausted from emotion and stress, and the weight of decisions I didn't want to make. There was a note on my nightstand in handwriting I didn't recognize. Dinner at 7:30. Dress nicely. The black dress in your closet will do. D. I crumpled the note in my fist, fury rising hot and fast. He was ordering me around like I was his property, like I'd already signed the contract and given up every shred of autonomy, but I went to the closet anyway and found the black dress he'd mentioned. Simple, elegant, probably worth more than a month of my old salary. It fit perfectly, of course. Everything he'd chosen for me fit perfectly, because he'd been watching me long enough to know every detail, every measurement, every vulnerable piece of my life. I looked at myself in the mirror, hair loose around my shoulders, minimal makeup because I'd refused to use anything from the collection of expensive cosmetics that had appeared in the bathroom, feet bare because I couldn't bring myself to put on the heels he'd also provided. This was my rebellion. Small, petty, meaningless. But it was mine. I found him in the dining room, already seated, wearing a different suit than this morning, this one navy blue, tailored to perfection. He looked up when I entered, and his eyes traveled down my body slowly before settling on my bare feet. One dark eyebrow lifted. No shoes? I don't feel like wearing shoes in my own home, I said, putting emphasis on the last two words. A smile ghosted across his lips. Not amused exactly, but something close. Sit, Emma. I sat, and food appeared immediately. Christmas dinner, I realized. Turkey, mashed potatoes, vegetables roasted to perfection, everything I would have missed by working my hospital shift. The irony wasn't lost on me. Have you made your decision? Dante asked, cutting into his turkey with precise movements. I picked up my fork, buying time. What if I ask for changes to the contract? What if I want to negotiate? What would you negotiate? The camera's in my bedroom. I forced myself to meet his eyes. I want them removed. I need privacy. No. The answer was immediate, inflexible. Your safety is non-negotiable, the cameras stay. Then I want them turned off at night, when I'm sleeping. He considered this, his head tilting slightly. I can agree to that. The cameras will only record movement, not constant footage after midnight. What else? I hadn't expected him to concede anything, and the small victory made me bolder. I want to keep working. Not full-time, but I want to keep my nursing license active. Volunteer work, at least. Absolutely not. His voice went hard. You going back to that hospital, being exposed to anyone who might want to hurt you to get to me? It's out of the question. Then I want something else to do, I pressed. I can't just sit here all day doing nothing. I'll go insane. Dante set down his silverware, studying me with those dark, intense eyes. What would you like to do? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't expected him to ask, to care. I don't know. Read, study? Maybe take online classes? Done. He pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. You'll have access to any educational platform you want, any books you desire, anything to keep your mind occupied. But Emma... He looked up, pinning me with his gaze. You stay here, in this penthouse, under my protection. That's not negotiable. Protection. The word he used when he meant control. But it was more than I'd had this morning. Small freedoms, tiny concessions, proof that maybe he wasn't completely inflexible. 6 months, I said quietly. And then I'm free? Completely free? Something flickered in his expression, too quick to read. 6 months. After that, we'll discuss the terms of extending our arrangement. I don't want to extend. You will. He said it with absolute certainty, like he could see the future and knew exactly how this would end. 6 months from now, Emma, you won't want to leave. You'll have everything you need, everything you've been missing. You'll be safe, cared for, protected. Why would you choose to go back to struggling? Because I'll be free, I wanted to say. Because freedom is worth more than comfort. But I didn't say it. I just picked up my fork and ate the expensive Christmas dinner in silence, while Dante watched me with those dark, possessive eyes. After dinner, he produced the contract again. Sign it, Emma. Stop torturing yourself with the illusion of choice. We both know how this ends. He was right. He'd always been right. From the moment I'd walked into Vincenzo's, maybe even before that, my fate had been sealed. I picked up the pen he offered, Heavy, expensive, probably worth more than my weekly paycheck had been. The signature page stared up at me, that blank line waiting for my name. 6 months. I could survive 6 months. I signed. Dante took the contract, his fingers brushing mine deliberately, and something in his expression shifted. Triumph, possession, satisfaction. He pulled out his phone, and within seconds, I heard the chime of a notification on mine. I checked it. A bank transfer confirmation. $50,000, just like he'd promised. "Welcome home, Emma," Dante said softly, dangerously. "Now you're truly mine." The first week passed in a blur of adjustment and resistance, of learning the boundaries of my new existence while testing them at every opportunity. Dante was gone most days, disappearing before dawn and returning late at night, always accompanied by his shadows in black suits. But even when he wasn't physically present, I felt him everywhere. In the cameras that tracked my movements, in Maria's careful management of my schedule, in the guards who appeared whenever I approached a door or window. I tried to establish a routine. Mornings in the library, losing myself in books I'd never had time to read. Afternoons studying online courses in child psychology. Dante had been true to his word about education. Evenings waiting for him to come home, hating how my pulse quickened when I heard his footsteps in the hallway. He was possessive in ways that should have terrified me, but instead created a confusing cocktail of fear and something darker. He wanted to know what I'd done every moment he was gone, what I'd eaten, what I'd read, who I'd spoken to. Though the answer was always the same, no one. He'd touch me constantly, a hand at the small of my back, fingers threading through my hair, his palm pressed against my cheek, claiming ownership with every casual caress. But he didn't push for sex, and I couldn't decide if that was a relief or more unsettling. He'd kiss me sometimes, hard and demanding, his hands gripping my hips or tangling in my hair, pulling me against him until I was breathless and dizzy. Then he'd pull away, leaving me confused and aching, his dark eyes glittering with satisfaction at my response. "When you're ready," he'd murmur against my temple. "When you come to me willingly, not because of a contract, but because you want to. That's when I'll have all of you." It was a different kind of trap, one that required my surrender rather than my submission. 2 weeks in, I made my first real mistake. I'd been reading in the library when I found his laptop, left open on the desk. He was in the shower. I could hear the water running from his bedroom suite. The screen showed an email chain, and my name caught my eye before I could stop myself from looking. Emma Brennan. Background report. My hands shook as I scrolled through the document. Everything was there. My entire life laid out in clinical detail. My father's death from cancer when I was 19, leaving behind medical bills that had destroyed my mother. My mother's subsequent spiral into alcoholism and our estrangement. My decision to become a nurse despite the crushing debt. Every job, every address, every relationship I'd ever had, and photos. God, so many photos. Me leaving the hospital, me at the grocery store, me sitting alone in my apartment, visible through a window I'd never thought to cover, surveillance photos taken over months. The date on the earliest one made my stomach drop, 8 months ago. He'd been watching me for 8 months before that blind date. "Find something interesting?" I spun around so fast I knocked the laptop, catching it before it fell. Dante stood in the doorway, hair damp from the shower, wearing only dark pants that hung low on his hips. The tattoos I'd glimpsed that first night were fully visible now, a serpent coiling up his ribs, symbols and script in a language I didn't recognize covering his chest and arms. "You've been watching me for 8 months, I said, my voice shaking. 8 months. How is that not insane? He moved into the room with that predatory grace, and I backed up instinctively until my spine hit the bookshelf. "I told you I make it my business to know things. I saw you at the hospital 9 months ago. You were comforting a child who just lost his mother, telling him stories, making him laugh even though he was broken inside. And I thought..." He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell his soap, see the water droplets still clinging to his collarbone. I thought, there's something genuine in this world after all. "So you stalked me?" The words came out as barely a whisper. "I learned about you," he corrected. "I wanted to understand what made you different. Why you gave so much when you had so little. Why you smiled even when you were exhausted. why you were real when everyone else was performing. His hand came up to cut my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone. And the more I learned, the more I knew I had to have you. Had to protect you before this world crushed all that light out of you. You don't protect people by imprisoning them, I said. But my voice had lost its strength. His touch was doing things to me, making my thoughts fuzzy, my resistance crumble. Don't I? His other hand found my waist, pulling me against him. You're not exhausted anymore. You're not skipping meals or working yourself into the ground. You're safe, warm, fed, educated. Tell me, Emma, would you be better off back in that apartment, drowning in debt, alone on Christmas? I wanted to say yes, wanted to tell him that poverty and freedom were better than gilded cages and possession, but the words wouldn't come, because some traitorous part of me knew he was right. I hate you, I whispered instead. No, you don't. He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. You hate that I'm right. You hate that you're starting to like it here. You hate that when I touch you. You don't want me to stop. His mouth found mine before I could deny it. And God help me, I kissed him back. Kissed him with all the frustration and confusion and desperate loneliness I'd been carrying for years. His hands gripped my hips, lifting me onto the desk, the laptop pushed aside carelessly. I wrapped my legs around him without thinking, pulling him closer, needing something I couldn't name. He broke the kiss, breathing hard, his forehead resting against mine. Say you want this. Say you want me. The words stuck in my throat, too honest, too much of a surrender. Not yet, he murmured, reading my silence. But soon, Emma, soon you'll admit it. He stepped back, leaving me cold and wanting on the desk, and walked away like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just proven exactly how much control he had over me. 3 weeks became a month. A month became 6 weeks. The routine became normal, and normal became comfortable. And comfortable became dangerous because I was forgetting what my old life had felt like. Dante was complicated, brutal in business. I'd overheard enough phone calls to understand the kind of man he was, the violence he commanded with a few words. But with me, he was different. Possessive, yes. Controlling, absolutely. But never cruel. He remembered that I liked my coffee with too much cream. He bought me books before I knew I wanted them. He'd find me studying late at night and carry me to bed without a word, tucking me in like I was something precious. It was Stockholm Syndrome, I told myself. Basic psychology. But knowing the name for it didn't make it less effective. The incident that changed everything happened on a Tuesday, 6 weeks into my captivity. I'd been reading in the living room when I heard shouting from Dante's office. Rare, because he was always controlled, always measured. Then a crash, breaking glass, and Dante's voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that was somehow more frightening than yelling. Marco appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Miss Brennan, please go to your room. What's happening? Now, Miss Brennan. But before I could move, Dante's office door flew open, and a man stumbled out, bloodied, terrified, with Dante following behind him like an avenging angel. The gun in Dante's hand was casual, an extension of his body, pointed at the man's spine. You stole from me, Dante said, his voice like ice. You thought I wouldn't notice. Thought you could skim from shipments and I'd be too busy to care. Dante, please, I have a family. So did the people whose products you cut with poison. The gun didn't waver. How many died because you wanted a bigger profit margin? 3? 4? The man was crying now, ugly sobs that made my stomach turn. Please, I'll pay it back, He saw me then, standing frozen in the living room, and something desperate flashed in his eyes. He lunged toward me, and everything happened too fast. Marco moving to intercept, the man pulling a knife from somewhere, Dante's roar of fury. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. The man dropped, blood pooling beneath him, and suddenly there were guards everywhere, moving the body, cleaning the floor, erasing what had just happened with practiced efficiency. But all I could see was Dante, standing over the corpse with that gun still in his hand, his eyes finding mine across the room. This was who he really was, not the man who bought me books and tucked me into bed. This man, this killer who just ended a life without hesitation, without remorse. I ran. Made it to my room and locked the door, my whole body shaking so hard my teeth chattered. The image of that man's eyes, alive one moment, empty the next, was burned into my retinas. I pressed my hands over my mouth to keep from screaming. Footsteps in the hallway, then Dante's voice, calm despite what had just happened. "Emma, open the door." "Go away." My voice cracked. "Open the door or I'll break it down. You have 3 seconds." He would do it. I knew he would. On trembling legs, I crossed to the door and unlocked it, then backed away as he entered. He'd cleaned the blood off his hands, but there were still specks on his shirt. He closed the door behind him, studying me with those dark eyes that saw too much. "You're afraid of me now," he observed. "You killed someone." I wrapped my arms around myself. "Right there in your home, He tried to hurt you." Dante's voice went hard. "The moment he moved toward you with that knife, his fate was sealed. He was desperate. He was dead the moment he betrayed me." He crossed to me in 2 strides, gripping my shoulders. "Listen to me, Emma. I am not a good man. I've never pretended to be. I've killed before and I'll kill again. But every violent thing I do, every brutal decision I make is to protect what's mine. And you," his grip tightened, "you are mine. Anyone who threatens you threatens me, and I eliminate threats." "This is insane," I whispered. "You're insane." "Maybe." His hands softened on my shoulders, becoming almost gentle. "But I'm your insanity now. For better or worse, we're bound together. You signed the contract. You took my money. You're living in my home, wearing clothes I bought, eating food I provide. You're already mine, Emma. You've been mine since the moment you walked into Vincenzo's. I want to leave." The words came out broken. "I can't do this. I can't." "Yes, you can." He pulled me against his chest, and I should have fought, but I was shaking too hard. "You're stronger than you know. You'll get through this. And tomorrow it will be easier. The day after, easier still. Until you realize that this..." He gestured to encompass the penthouse, himself, everything. "This is where you belong." I cried against his expensive shirt while he held me, one hand stroking my hair, murmuring things in Italian I didn't understand. The man who just killed someone without blinking was comforting me like I was a child, and the cognitive dissonance was almost worse than the violence had been. Eventually, exhaustion won. He carried me to the bed, removed my shoes, covered me with blankets. I felt him sit beside me, his hand continuing to stroke my hair long after I should have fallen asleep. "I know you're afraid," he said quietly, probably thinking I was asleep. "But you're safer with me than you've ever been, Emma. I'll burn the world down before I let anything happen to you, even if you hate me for it." The weeks after that were different. I stopped pretending I had any control, stopped fighting the inevitable. Dante had been right. It got easier. The memory of the dead man faded, replaced by the routine of my days, the comfort of knowing every need would be met. He was more careful around me after that, keeping his business separate, ensuring I never saw that side of him again. But I knew it was there, lurking beneath the expensive suits and careful touches. I'd seen the monster, and there was no unknowing it. But here's the thing they don't tell you about monsters. Sometimes they're the only ones who truly see you. Sometimes their possessiveness feels like being cherished for the first time in your life. Sometimes their darkness becomes familiar enough that you forget what the light looked like. 4 months in, something shifted. I was in the library, my sanctuary, when Dante came home early. I heard his footsteps, knew he was looking for me, and found myself setting down my book with anticipation rather than dread. He appeared in the doorway, still in his work suit, looking tired in a way I'd learned to recognize. Bad day. Difficult decisions. Blood on his hands that no amount of washing would clean. "Come here," he said quietly. I went. Not because I had to, not because of the contract, but because I wanted to ease that tension in his shoulders. Wanted to be the light in his darkness the way he'd somehow become the steady ground beneath my chaos. He pulled me onto his lap as he sank into one of the leather chairs, burying his face in my neck. "Tell me about your day," he murmured against my skin. "Tell me something good." So I did. Told him about the psychology course I was taking, about the theory I'd been reading, about the coffee Maria had made that morning that had been perfectly sweet. Normal, mundane things that seemed to drain the violence out of him inch by inch. His hands moved over me, not sexual, just grounding, needing to feel me solid and real beneath his touch. "You're happy here," he said. Not quite a question. "I'm content." The admission felt like defeat and victory simultaneously. "You were right. I don't skip meals anymore. I'm not exhausted all the time. I'm learning things, growing in ways I couldn't before, but..." He pulled back to look at me, reading the hesitation in my voice. "But sometimes I miss the freedom to choose, to walk outside without guards, to see friends, to just exist without being watched." He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. Then, "The contract ends in 2 months. I know. I'm not letting you go, Emma." His eyes held mine, dark and intense and absolutely certain. "I'm not capable of it. You've become necessary. Like breathing. Like existing. I don't function without you anymore." It should have sounded insane, obsessive, unhealthy. Instead, it sounded like the most honest thing anyone had ever said to me. "What if I want to go?" I asked softly. "Then I'll let you." The words seemed to cost him something. "I won't trap you forever if you're truly miserable. But Emma..." His hand cupped my face, forcing me to meet his gaze. "Ask yourself if you really want to leave. Ask yourself if going back to that lonely apartment, that exhausting life, is actually what you want. Or if maybe, just maybe, you found something here worth keeping." The question hung between us, heavy with implications. I thought about my old life, the crushing debt, the loneliness, the exhaustion that lived in my bones. Then I thought about this life, the comfort, the security, the way Dante looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. "I don't know," I whispered honestly. "You have 2 months to decide." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to mine. "But I'm going to use every moment of those 2 months to convince you to stay, to show you that what we have here is real, even if it started wrong. And if I still want to leave at the end?" His jaw clenched, and I saw the war in his eyes, the monster who wanted to cage me forever versus the man who wanted me to choose him freely. "Then I'll let you go," he said finally. "But Emma, you'll have to look me in the eye and tell me you don't want this. You'll have to mean it. No lies, no pretending. Complete honesty." I nodded, knowing that he was counting on the fact that I couldn't lie to him. That after 4 months of living in his space, breathing his air, learning his rhythms, I was too tangled up in him to separate truth from captivity. His mouth found mine then, and this kiss was different from the others. Softer, almost tentative, asking rather than demanding. I kissed him back, my hands threading through his hair, and felt something in my chest crack open. This was surrender, but it was also choice. This was captivity, but it was also the safest I'd ever felt. This was wrong, but it was also the only thing that had felt right in years. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his lips to my forehead. "Stay with me, Emma. Choose me. Choose this." "You're impossible," I murmured against his throat, "but I'm yours." He said it fiercely, possessively. "Completely and utterly yours, even if you don't realize it yet. This thing between us, it goes both ways. You've caged me just as much as I've caged you." The final 2 months passed in a blur of growing intimacy. Dante kept his promise. He courted me like we were starting fresh, like I had a real choice in the matter. He took me to private rooftop gardens, always heavily guarded but beautiful nonetheless. He cooked for me sometimes, late at night when his staff was gone, making traditional Italian dishes while I sat on the counter and watched. He introduced me to his sister over video call, and she'd welcomed me with open arms, oblivious to how I'd come into her brother's life. He opened up about his past, the family business he'd inherited at 22 when his father was killed, the enemies he'd made, the violence he'd survived. He showed me scars and told me stories, pulling back the curtain on the monster until I understood that he was just a man trying to survive in a world that rewarded brutality. And slowly, terrifyingly, I fell in love with him. Not the Stockholm Syndrome kind of love, though maybe that was part of it, but real love. The kind that saw his flaws and chose him anyway. The kind that made my heart race when he walked through the door, the kind that made me reach for him in the night, needing his warmth, his presence, his impossible certainty that we belonged together. The 6-month mark arrived on a Saturday in late June. 6 months since that blind date on Christmas Eve. 6 months since my life had irrevocably changed. Dante had been tense all week, and I knew why. The contract expired today. I could walk away, take my money, start over somewhere he couldn't find me. He'd promised to let me go if I truly wanted it. But did I want it? I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city that had once felt so far away. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. Behind me, I heard Dante enter the room, his footsteps heavy with dread. Emma. Just my name, weighted with everything unsaid. I turned to face him. He looked wrecked, hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it, tie gone, shirt partially unbuttoned. His eyes held something I'd never seen before. Fear. Real, genuine fear that I would leave. The contract expires at midnight, he said unnecessarily. You're free to go whenever you want. I'll have Marco drive you anywhere, give you references, make sure you're set up in a new place. Whatever you need. And if I stay? My voice was steady, clearer than it had been in months. Something flickered in his expression. Hope. Desperate and raw. If you stay, we renegotiate. No contract this time. Just you and me, choosing each other every day. You'd have more freedom. Guard still, because I can't compromise on your safety. But you could work again if you wanted, see friends, live something closer to a normal life. Closer to normal, I echoed, but not actually normal. Emma, nothing about my life is normal. He crossed to me but stopped a few feet away, like he was afraid to touch me and find out I was already gone. I'm a criminal. I hurt people for a living. I have enemies who would kill you just to hurt me. Normal was never an option for us. I know. I stepped closer, closing the distance he'd left. I've known that for months, and I'm still here. You're here because of the contract. No. I placed my hand on his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath my palm. I'm here because somewhere along the way, this stopped being a prison and started being home. Because you see me, Dante, the real me, not the tired nurse or the good person or the struggling woman. Just me, Emma. And you chose me anyway. His hands came up to grip my waist, almost painful in their intensity. Say it clearly, Emma. Please. I need to hear it. I looked up at him, this impossible, violent, possessive man who'd rearranged my entire life, and smiled. I'm staying. Not because of money or contracts or fear. I'm staying because I choose you. I choose this. I choose us. The sound he made was almost anguished. He crushed me against him, burying his face in my hair, his whole body shaking with relief. You're sure? Emma, you have to be sure because I'm not strong enough to let you go twice. I'm sure. I pulled back enough to look at him. I love you. God help me. I love you even though you're crazy and possessive and you probably need therapy. He laughed. Actually laughed, the sound rough and beautiful. I definitely need therapy. But Emma... His hands framed my face, thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized I was crying. I love you more than I thought I was capable of loving anything. You're my light in the darkness, my reason for existing, my everything. He kissed me then, and it was different from every kiss before. This wasn't possession or demand or even persuasion. This was promise. This was choice. This was two broken people choosing to build something whole together. When we broke apart, both breathless, I whispered against his mouth, "Take me to bed. Emma." Not because I have to, not because of a contract, because I want to, because I'm choosing you, all of you, everything you are. The look in his eyes was pure possession, mixed with reverence. He lifted me effortlessly, carrying me toward his bedroom, the one I'd never entered, the sanctum he'd kept separate until I was ready. And I was ready. Ready to fully surrender to this twisted, beautiful thing we'd built. Ready to be his completely, the way he'd already become mine. 6 months later, I stood in the pediatric wing of St. Mary's Hospital, my badge clipped to the scrubs Dante had insisted be custom-made for comfort. The children gathered around as I finished reading a story, their faces bright with laughter despite their circumstances. "Miss Emma, will you come back tomorrow?" a little girl asked, her IV pole draped with decorations I'd brought. "I'll be here every Tuesday and Thursday," I promised, ruffling her hair. "You can count on it." Marco waited by the door, always present but less obviously than before. I'd gotten used to the guards, the way they shadowed my movements. They were part of my life now, part of the package deal of loving Dante Salvatore. My phone buzzed. A text from Dante. "Dinner at 7. I'm cooking. Don't be late." I smiled, typing back, "I'll be there. Love you." The response was immediate. "Love you more. Always." Sarah had eventually learned the truth, or a version of it, and had been horrified at first, but she'd seen how I'd changed, how I glowed now, how the exhaustion had left my eyes. She didn't understand it, couldn't comprehend how I'd fallen for a man like Dante, but she'd accepted it because she saw I was happy. And I was. Deliriously, impossibly happy in a life that should have been a nightmare, but had somehow become a dream. Was it healthy? Probably not. Was it conventional? Absolutely not. But it was mine. Chosen freely after all the illusions had been stripped away. I'd come to that blind date on Christmas Eve expecting nothing, hoping for connection, terrified of disappointment. Instead, I'd found a man who'd seen me at my most invisible and decided I was worth everything. Who'd taken my life apart and rebuilt it into something stronger, even if his methods were questionable. I'd found home in the most unexpected place. In the arms of a monster who loved me like I was his salvation, and maybe I was. Maybe we saved each other, him from his darkness, me from my invisible drowning. Maybe that's what love was supposed to be. Two broken people becoming whole together. As I left the hospital that evening, Marco falling into step beside me, I thought about that girl who'd walked into Vincenzo's 6 months ago. She'd been so afraid, so lost, so alone. She wasn't any of those things anymore. I was Emma Salvatore now. We'd gotten married in a small ceremony 3 months ago, just family and his closest associates. I was a mafia wife, a kept woman, a bird in a gilded cage who'd learned to love her prison because it came with wings. The SUV waited at the curb, warm and safe, ready to take me home to the man who'd orchestrated my entire life with the precision of a maestro conducting a symphony. I climbed in, thinking about the dinner waiting, the life we were building, the future stretching ahead of us. Unconventional, complicated, perfectly imperfect. My phone buzzed again. "Hurry home, Emma. I miss you." And I realized that somewhere between captivity and choice, between fear and love, I'd stopped running from Dante Salvatore. I'd run toward him instead, and I'd never been happier.